Good morning, everyone. I hope you're well. Hopefully many of you have tuned in. I'm just going to see. In fact, I can't see on what I'm looking at. But I will ace it as always. There's always oh, there we go. I've got it. We're all good. Oh, we've got lots of people joining us this morning. This is good. So good morning, everyone. We have a lovely morning Facebook Live for you today. It's the final day of FII Awareness Week. And what a week it's been. I mean, it's been absolutely incredible. There have been so many tears shed here at Sunshine. We found it very, very emotional indeed. But I know as well from the feedback that we've had, lots of people have taken away lots of amazing hints, tips, advice. So I'd like to think that we're finishing the week feeling stronger than when we started. Now, we've got loads more lined up for you today. We've got lots of content. We've got lots of information to share with you. And if you're watching this and you think someone would be particularly interested, do tag them now because we're going to be talking in depth quite shortly. So tag away. Also, do say hello. I've noticed lots of you are saying hello, which is brilliant. And we've got some blogs and stuff being shared, which is absolutely amazing. There seems to be a disabled mothers' rights campaign shared. So anything you've done this week or anything you found this week in relation to FII, share it in the comments. Let's get a community vibe going on. And if you want to share your stories, by all means, share them in the comments. We'd love to hear them. Or if you'd like them to be shared anonymously, just send them to our page in terms of a direct message, and we'll make sure your story is heard because we've got lots going on our website. Now, this morning, We've heard lots from Kathy Long this week in terms of social work, and of course the brand new practice guidance that she's produced with her FII expert colleagues. And for those who attended the BASWA webinar yesterday, it was absolutely fascinating to see the statistics that we're going to be pulling together into a blog so everybody can see them. But the sheer volume of children with disabilities ending up on child protection plans, and when their parents also have disabilities, like there's a real theme, and it was incredibly alarming, but amazing statistical work being done by Andy Wilson yesterday. I just absolutely loved every minute of it. So we will be sharing that and making sure that it's accessible. Now, today we have got more of a treat for you. We've got Kathy's team here, her independent social workers. They're absolutely amazing. So for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by these amazing, outstanding social workers. I don't know where I came from then. Social workers who've recently been recognised for their expertise within SEND. We've got Rachel Gavin and Mary Cartlidge. Welcome, ladies. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So do you want to introduce yourselves briefly before we carry on?
Yes, I'll go first, Clarissa. My name is Mary Cartlidge. I'm an independent social worker. I have been qualified quite a few years now. My background was in children and safeguarding once I qualified, and I have been independent for just over 12 months.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. And you know, Kathy raves about you both. And Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel Gavin, work with Kathy and Mary. So I worked in social care for probably 20 years, and the last approximately 6 years as a social worker, and a year with the lovely Kathy and Kathy's team, coming up to a year. So my background originally was working with young adults and adults with learning disability in a learning disability team. But I've since worked independently, and before I was working independently as well with neurodivergent children, young people and adults. So yes, I've been around a while.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And before we carry on, I'm just going to shut down. I've got things pinging, and I always say to people, shut down your email, shut down your Teams. I hadn't done it, so I'm really sorry for the pinging. But I can't believe it's been nearly a year that you guys have all been working together. I mean, what a year.
Gone very quickly and been a brilliant year.
It's great.
I'm very busy.
Yes.
I'm very busy.
Very busy, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and it's good because families are obviously getting what they need. But it's terribly sad that they need you. Sorry to say, but it is.
We say it all the time. We say it all the time.
It's just
and also we can't help everybody, you know, all the inquiries we get, we try and do between the three of us as much as we can, but we can't take every referral on, and that's really worrying.
Yeah, and quite heartbreaking, to be honest, because it doesn't leave us feeling very, very comfortable then, when we can't help everyone that, you know, wish we could, you know. And
striking that balance is really hard, because this is a vocation for you, isn't it? I mean, this is what you were made for. And you've both got that lived experience as well. So you know where that parent is. You understand the feelings that they're going through, and the situations that they're in. And you do just want to help everyone. I know we get this a lot with our advocates, you know, where they take on far too much work sometimes because they just want to help. It's in their nature. And I'm sure that balance must be really tricky for you both.
Very, very. It doesn't really get any sort of easier as well, because as you said, we've got lived experience as well, and we understand. And it's difficult.
But how lovely, though, that people can access you. I know that, you know, I know Kathy originally because I was her client. That's how we met. And when I sat down with her, and I was sort of in my usual frantic state, which is not how I am now, because I felt like I was on display and being judged and being on trial and stuff. And when I first had that first conversation with her, I was like, oh my God, somebody gets it. Oh, like the relief was incredible. So, okay, so what I'm going to do then, we've been, loads of questions have been submitted to us, which you've received, I've received. So I'm going to crack straight on with these questions. If anybody does have any questions in the audience and they want to submit them, please do send them in the chat. And we will do our very, very best to come to them at the end if we have time. We're going to be here for about an hour. So, right, question number 1 then. I feel like I'm on a game show now. What advice would you give to a parent whose child might be sectioned for assessment only?
Okay, so I would advise taking a look at the nearest relative term, so within the Mental Health Act. A particularly good website is the Mind. So I'd have a look at Mind because it gives very, very clear guidelines on the powers and the rights of the nearest relative. So that would be my my advice around that at this point.
And you know, when a child or anyone is sectioned, they do have the right to legal advice that's free, don't they?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So we actually work with a solicitor that does this. So if anybody is in that position and you would like to access that legal aid, it's not means tested, this one, is it? Because it's actually somebody who's essentially incapacitated through mental health. So if anybody does need any advice or they need signposting to a solicitor who can do that, do let us know and we will absolutely do that. Just send us a message. Okay, so on to the next question. How much of a distinction should there be between a child in need assessment under Section 17 due to disability and a Section 47 safeguarding type of assessment during a SEND tribunal appeal or writing an Ehcp? Is there a legal distinction between the two? And how can a parent make sure an assessment of a disabled child is focused on disability-based social needs? It's a big one.
Big one. So myself and Rachel, when George sent us these questions, we've had a couple of conversations about these, and people may have watched your week of events going on. So most local authorities will have one assessment format. So the Section 17 and the Section 47 assessments really are the same assessment. It's a child and family. It's usually referred to as a child and family single assessment.
Okay.
And at the end of a social worker, local authority social worker doing that assessment, and teams can be divided into, some do that the initial assessment, and then it goes to a different team following that assessment. So it's very much a process. So Section 17 is a child in need, and we know children with disabilities come under the child in need. However, it will be a single child and family assessment that's done. And there is a clear distinction. Child in need is Section 17, and Section 47 is the reasonable cause that the local authority social worker team or teams cause to suspect that there is a likelihood or significant harm. That's the Section 47. So the question's quite big. So if it's a child and it's a request for a Section 17 to do with the Ehcp, what you'd like to think is you're going to get a Section 17 assessment in line with that child's needs, disabilities. However, what you tend to get is that single assessment again.
Okay, so they're just coming at it essentially from a slightly different angle.
Yes, yes.
And I think as somebody who was subject to both, the Section 17 felt like an assessment. I mean, it was still judgy as far as I'm concerned, but it was an assessment. I felt personally, so coming from personal experience, that the Section 47, mine was done in a very unlawful way, but it felt very much like an investigation. And I think they were, personally, I felt like that was the big difference for me in terms of feeling. But I think with Section 47, the parents should be involved, shouldn't they? Unless they can actually identify or evidence the fact that perhaps by bringing the parents into the assessment, the child is going to be at further risk. Is that right?
Yeah.
Correct. And we use all assessments that the local authority will use a template, and it's the assessment framework. So these are what we're talking about today is all available online. The assessment framework, the working together document, those two things are, the assessment framework's pictorial, it's a visual. The working together document, it's there for social workers, it's there for local authorities, but it's also there as a guideline of this is what should, you know, assessments should be child-centered. They should be focusing on the child's needs.
Yes.
And I think, you know, a classic example is where I read a local authority assessment and it talks about guidance and boundaries. And if it's a child with any diagnosis that we're talking about today, autism, ADHD, PDA, it's not, you know, the guidance and boundaries are going to be, you know, it's different. It's different, very different. And I think that's the lens. We've got this very fixated lens of how we assess a child at the moment. And I think that's what really needs to be looked at and changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just made a note, actually, just in case, because I know George is in the comments, he's already done it. He's brilliant. We've got the same brain, me and George. I believe that we are siblings or something and we just don't know about it. Maybe I'm Kathy's love child, who knows? But we're posting links to the assessment framework and the working together document. So I'm apologizing because I hate looking off camera, but I'm documenting things and writing them down and then checking the comments. But I promise you, I'm definitely engaged. So next question.
Can I just go back to that other bit of the question? People, a lot of families go, we haven't got a disabled social worker. So all local authorities will have their own threshold for you to be allocated a disabled children's social worker. And invariably you're rejected because, and I'm saying this with inverted commas, your child is not disabled enough. So you can also look on your local authority website. They will have what we call a children's protocol manual.
Oh, okay.
And that will tell you every single procedure for everything to do with children's services. So it will tell you what should happen as a child in need, as a child protection, disabled children's. That's my go-to place if I'm working with a family. I go to the local authority and I start digging deeply.
Each local authority, will they be different, or is there something, you know, like for instance with SEND and Ehcps, for instance, in England, each local authority might have their different policies, but essentially they're trumped by the law. Is that the same in this respect as well? So
there's certain things that will be trumped by the law. So 45 working days for an assessment to be done. That's across the board, but then there'll be little things that'll be slightly different. And some authorities, so statutory visits of a child in need, statutory visits of a child protection is trumped by law. But some local authorities have tightened that up because millions of reasons, managerial reasons, Ofsted reasons.
Okay, so that makes complete sense. But I think, again, you know, if any families are going through this and they need extra advice on this, just send us a message and we will either signpost you to the right place or we'll be able to provide you with the support that you need. Now, I'm going to go on to the next question then. Once an allegation of parent-carer blame or FII leads to child protection procedures, that interest will remain until a child is 25 years old. Consequently, 15 years after the name is removed from the child protection register, she herself is being accused of FII in respect of her own confirmed diagnoses. She now has probably has PTSD. How can social services records be amended, corrected, or deleted?
So going back to, children services use what we call an integrated children's system. It's a computer package software.
Okay.
And any child who has been open to children's social care will have an ID number and they will be known. Once they're 18, it's closed because they're an adult. But when that child becomes an adult in their own right and then has children, that information could be looked back on. To get it amended or to get, I think, was it amended, deleted?
Or corrected.
Corrected. My first advice would be you can do a subject access request on a file with social care. They have to redact it, so it can take time. You can read your file and then you can make a complaint and ask for an amendment to go on your file saying this isn't the case, and it has to be agreed.
And the ICO can be quite helpful in terms of guidelines as well.
Yes.
And you know, watching this obviously something that plagues a lot of the families that we work with. And Kathy was the question was asked. In fact, I asked the question yesterday in the BASMA webinar as well. And Kathy said, in all her time in dealing these cases, she's never known a case where they've actually moved it. It's really bad, and maybe we need to be doing some work there. So what
I've done in the past is I've read the assessment, and then I've had sessions with the parents where there's factual inaccuracies. You know, they've got the wrong, you know, diagnosis, or what school have said, or what the attendance is, and then we've written a report and asked that document to be attached to the assessment to say, actually, there's some factual inaccuracies. So that's one way of doing it, but very difficult.
And the thing is, you know, like Kathy said yesterday, and I know myself, you know, you've been cleared of this. This isn't a criminal record. You've been cleared of something that, you know, in a lot of cases, particularly some of the ones where we're helping with, we've gone to the ombudsman, they've been found to be wrong. You know, so everybody across the board has agreed that, you know, whoever decided that this child should be on child protection is wrong. However, when you then go in with your other children to the GP, dentist, wherever, it's there glaring at you at the top of the file. And it's just awful. You feel like an absolute criminal of the worst kind. So, okay, so that's that one then. I could probably go on and on and on about that one, but it's not going to be helpful. What's the outcome for the parents in an FII situation after a psychological assessment and it comes back as saying yes to FII?
So any assessment, so a psychological assessment, in my experience, is usually undertaken when you're either in public law outline, which is along the lines of you've got child protection, and the local authority have also initiated public law outline. Right. And that's the process before you would be going into care proceedings. Okay. So I'm trying not to make it too complicated. So public law outline or child protection, the local authority may say, we're going to do some psychological assessments. Okay. And if the psychologist is coming back saying it is FII, then I would like to be thinking, actually, what recommendations, what are those recommendations, but also what are they basing that evidence on?
Because, you know, we're listening to all the doctors this week, and there's been a lot of doctors sharing information and clinicians. And it's been widely agreed that FII isn't something that can be diagnosed, that, you know, a diagnosable condition would be the factitious disorder imposed upon another. Is that what it's called? Which is the new version of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So FII is a set of behaviors, is what has come out of the research. So I'd have a question mark over whether this clinician even knows what FII is, if they're saying that it's diagnosable, because the research is telling us it's not a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I was answering the question, you know, if a clinical psychologist is saying, for example, Rachel, it's FII, I'll be saying to Rachel, get a clinical psychologist who knows about this stuff and counter-argue it. But that there's a cost implication to that as well. So it's about educating, isn't it? It's about educating professionals and going, well, what actually do you mean by that? I'm working with a family at the moment, and the social workers, and there was a little bit of rumbling of FII. Clinical psychologist came in and actually has damned all the professionals. You know, I'm very much in favour of mum, you know, which is positive. But should she have to go through that in the first place?
The thing, you know, parents are having to spend a fortune on independent assessments to prove people wrong, and then they're proven wrong and still not cleared. I mean, the injustice is from start to finish, isn't it? There's just nothing nice about this process at all. But at the same time, so I'm going to move on to the next question, and this brings it in nicely, actually. You know, at the same time, we fully appreciate and support the practice of safeguarding. It's very, very important that we are protecting our children, protecting our families. So let's flip this on its head a bit. What should good safeguarding look like?
From a social work's perspective, defensible decision making, so evidence-based. So when you're assessing children, young people, you know, the assessments need to be holistic. You need to take in, there's lots of different factors, isn't there, in life of families that influence things, and holistic assessment is just an absolute must. And I think we've talked about it a lot this week, haven't we, about professional curiosity, not judgmental. We need to be curious, but look at the wider picture then. It needs to be child-centered, but we also need to be considerate of the family's needs as a whole. Absolutely. And that is crucial, as part of an assessment. And as professionals in any profession, we aren't expected, and we will not know everything that there is to know of lots of different things. But the difference with a good professional and good assessments is the curiosity. If you don't know or you're not sure, you find out. You don't make assumptions. You never make assumptions.
No. And I think it's that filling what we hear from families is that there's a lot of filling the knowledge gaps with nasty stuff, stuff that there's no evidence for. And I think one of the things that I've seen quite a lot, and it does go some way to explain the nature behind some of these accusations, is if you work in social care, I cannot and don't want to imagine the scenarios that you were placed in when there's genuine safeguarding concerns and harm to a child. Rachel, I know, because I'm from South Wales, I pay quite a lot of attention to South Wales news. There's been some tremendously awful things happening in recent months in South Wales. And I'm not going to go into detail because I can already feel choked up over it. That is what you are subjected to as social workers on a daily basis. So when you come across a case where you don't understand the presentation of the parent and you don't understand the presentation of the child, I can see, and I'm not condoning it, I can see how on face value, sometimes it looks like there might be something to safeguard. But it's that, like you said, applying that curious brain rather than, right, let's not jump to child abuse, which is what I've been subjected to myself, in terms of social work practice. Let's try and clean the slate and go into this with a fresh set of eyes. And not assume that this case in front of me is like the one I've just left behind. And it's a real skill set to have that open mind.
Absolutely huge, and you have to be very experienced. You have to have it's a very, very big responsibility.
It's really, really tough. So as much as we said from the start of FII week, this was not going to be a social worker bashing week. This is absolutely not that. And I think this is exactly what I'm saying here. I empathize with the difficulties that social care have. I wouldn't have been able to say that several years ago because of the harm that they've caused my family. But at the same time, I can empathize. But this is why it makes me really frustrated that the thresholds are so high getting into that disability social care team. Because actually, if you got into that team, I'm not saying it would be plain sailing, but at least they've got a slightly different mindset because they're looking at disabilities all day long. So it is really, really hard. But I think, that what I just happened to think about, that Walt Whitman quote about don't be judgmental, be curious, or be curious and not judgmental. We've shared it actually on our Facebook page this week. And I think that is a real key part to the practice behind the scenes. Okay, so this is the next question. It sounds like me, but it's not me, I promise you. We've been through hell. We don't trust anyone. How do we start trusting social workers and the local authority?
This is a really tough one, isn't it? And it very much depends, I guess, what's happened as well. And what I would say is advocacy services are very helpful, and as well as helping maybe facilitate that communication between the family and statutory services. I think generally most people don't come into professions to wrong, to hurt anyone, or but yes, things happen. I just think that facilitating that communication, trying with, I would say, independent advocates, sort of independent of the local authority. I know you don't mind me saying that, but I think that's very important and quite significant with his difficulties. Yeah, that can be quite helpful. But yeah, it's not a straightforward answer, really. Yeah. Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, me and Rachel were talking about this, and I talk about this to quite a few colleagues. You know, as parents and as adults, we repair fractured relationships. And, you know, there's sometimes I get it wrong because I'm human, and that fallibility. And for me, that trust, you know, being able to say to the social worker, you know, I don't trust you. I don't trust the system. I'm frightened. I'm really worried that it's going to be really, you know, it's going to get worse. You're not going to do what's needed. And then we're going to, and let it not spill out in that emotional dysregulation, but just be honest and brave. Do the coffee and chat on a Wednesday with Sunshine Support, and have a, you know, I talk to somebody, you know, and she says, have a resource team, have that resource team, but repairing. And if it's a good social worker, they'll understand that that's what they need to do. They need to build your trust up, and it's relation-based social work.
Which is very much what you're taught in social work, is relationship-based.
Yeah. You know, it's that putting the kettle on. Say, you know, if I was as a local authority social worker, I would try and go in and say, put the kettle on, let's have a cup of tea, let's chat. Yeah. Let's just build that relationship up, and, you know, being open to that.
And I think, you know, to my advice to social workers would definitely be, you know, look at trauma responsive ways of working with people. These families have been traumatized by the system, so they will rightly be trying to protect themselves, which looks like they're being defensive. But research trauma responsive approaches and connect with them. Like you said, getting down with a cup of tea and just having a chat. But also from the parents' point of view, you're absolutely right. Having an advocate that can mediate is brilliant. If you can't stretch to that, or you can't get any funding to sort of provide that for you, attending your local, you know, parent carer forum where you can have a good whinge and get it out of your system, or coming to our cuppa and chat on a Wednesday evening, which is free of charge. Getting it out of your system. One of the things that we have learned through our webinars as well is the low arousal approach. So do give that a Google. The low arousal approach is about looking at you first before you approach a situation, and making sure that you are really regulated. So that's cuppa and chat, taking care of your own needs, making sure you're calm, and, you know, you understand how your breathing can affect your brain and calm it down. Those things will help, because sometimes we have to bite our tongue to take a bit of risk to move forward. And it's really tough trusting new social workers, because you've been harmed by a previous one, and you are absolutely well within your rights to feel like you're at high risk, because essentially they've harmed you before and they've harmed your family before. But it's about, you can still be protective of your family, you can still be a good advocate, but you can also be very regulated and then fall apart after they've gone, you know. So it's about looking at that. But again, you know, if anybody wants to chat about that, our cuppa and chat is precisely for that. So we can.
Kathy talked about the cuppa and chat. Me and Rachel and Kathy are going to start dropping into odd ones, so that'll be good. You know, and also as parents, you know, have that impact in a way, a bit of empowerment. You know your child.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's about really believing in and doing it. You know, once the lid's off and we're ranting and we're off on one, then in a way we're disempowered, and it's trying to work out, it's getting that balance of being able to say, actually, I'm finding this really difficult, and this strategy and this approach would work because that would meet my child's needs. You're evidencing in that meeting and that assessment how you meet your child's needs.
Exactly.
And I did say to a family a while back, you know, there was a PDA, you know, boy, it was not going to work, a social worker wading in with size 25 Wellingtons and wanting to do the bedroom check and wanting to see the child alone. And, you know, look at strategy. Well, what would work? Well, a video may work. A voice message may work. Really, what would work? How best would it work? And it may still not be ideal, but it's looking at things differently through that different lens.
Being child-centered.
Yeah.
That child-centered, not all children, that
Yeah.
particular child. Okay, I'll go on to the next question then. I have an autistic ADHD son of 13 years old. He has an Ehcp and doing well at secondary school. Over the years, I've noticed similarities between him and I. A very common theme. I think I've got ADHD too, but scared to go for an assessment in case it affects my son in any way. Will a local authority villainize me for seeking a diagnosis? Now, before you answer, I've got somebody at my door. This always happens, doesn't it? So I'm just going to switch my camera off whilst you answer, and I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely no reason to feel uncomfortable with mention that to local authority. Embrace it. You know, you've got a very good understanding of your child as well. Absolutely don't have any concerns about that at all. Personally, I don't think, you know, you need to, and yeah, embrace it.
And it would have to be open. So if you are open as a child in need, for example, because of your son's need and the Ehcp process, and you have an allocated social worker and you go for your assessments, then you can say that, like Rachel said, you know, you can tell them, actually, I've been diagnosed ADHD, I've been diagnosed autistic, and I've also been diagnosed with an overactive thyroid, whatever those things. If you are not involved with children's social care, it's not even a discussion.
Yeah.
No discussion needed. You don't need to ring them up and let them know. You don't need to tell anybody of that diagnosis. You know, you can look at whether an adult social care assessment would be beneficial, and that may then go, oh, we'll open children's as well. But it's all based on threshold and weight.
Sometimes as well, I think identity is absolutely key when it comes to diagnosis, and we know that, we feel that, we completely empathize, we understand. However, you could also go, so for instance, Karina in our team does a pre-ADHD diagnostic assessment. So it basically says what the likelihood is and whether she would actually recommend you go forward. Now, some people will receive that document and it's a very detailed assessment and say, well, actually, personally, that's helped me with my identity. I don't need to go any further. So it's not on medical records. It's a sort of safer option, but it's not a firm diagnosis, if you know what I mean. It's not that final diagnosis. And I sometimes find that parents find that really, really helpful, because it does give them that sense of identity. They can still get things like, you know, if the diagnosis helps with things like PIP, they can still go with that because you don't need a diagnosis for PIP. You can still get your access to work through the DWP because that, again, is needs-based and not diagnostic-based. So there's still a lot of perks, I think, to kind of going halfway and getting a pre-assessment done as well. So again, if anybody needs any more advice on that, just do send us a message. Okay, if we receive a report from a social worker and we don't, oh, this is a big one, and we don't agree with what has been said, how do we challenge that report?
I would work directly, go back with the social worker in the first instance, look at what it is that you don't is not factually correct, suggest some amendments. And I think, Mary, you mentioned earlier about attaching a report around what those amendments need to be.
I would, you know, once you've had an assessment done, good practice is that the social worker has a copy of the single assessment and brings it round. And again, sorry, I'm a bit of a tea drinker, cup of tea, sit down and give you, or leave it with you, perhaps. I'm just trying to think of it on my feet. So I would leave the assessment with the family and say, here's the assessment, and I'm going to come back. Let's fix a date, and I'll come round and we'll go through it. And any queries, or there's a, you know, my independent assessment, so will always be a date wrong. There'll always be some, you know, name, family member I've just muddled up. You know, it's that fallibility. And get a highlighter pen and go through it and pull out, well, actually, no, that isn't what happened. This is what happened. And make sure that whoever said something, so if school are saying is fine in school, because we obviously hear a lot of that.
Yeah. Who
said that? Who actually said that? Did the class teacher, the cleaner, the lunchtime supervisor, the lollipop lady, or who's saying that? And actually, if they're saying he's fine in school or she's fine in school, well, what does that look like? How do you know he's fine in school? Because I was at a school this week and they were like, he's fine in school. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because what I'm seeing is very different. So it's that lens, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, be curious, like Clarissa said, that curiosity.
Absolutely. And I think as well, the way that we put it across. So as a parent, I say we as a parent. So if you go back with the amendments in an angry nature, and by the way, you are valid in feeling angry, but if you communicate that anger back to them, it can trigger something. Okay. Now it might be a personal thing, but they've got the power and it's really sad, but this is the game. And unfortunately, we've got to play the game. And I tend to find we did a webinar actually on how to bridge the gap between home and school, and that how to sort of repair fractured relationships, but also how to prevent them. And it's that sort of, you know, showing that you're appreciative. So saying thank you so much for the work that you've done on this assessment. I can see a lot of time has gone into it. I've got a few concerns and I hope you don't mind, but I've highlighted them below. And then you list your concerns. And then at the end you say, I know that you want what's in you've got my best interest at heart and my child's best interest at heart. And I really hope that you consider my points in order to get the best out of this assessment. And I think sometimes if you, I'm not going to say the word, but it's a not a very nice sandwich is what I'm saying. So you do the good, the bad and the good. You know what I'm saying?
And I would email that. You know, you can have that conversation verbally with the social worker, and then you can email them saying, I've read the assessment. Do you want to do it verbally as well as written? I would always, whatever my, biggest advice is, if you are going to not complain, but have concerns, are worried, always you can do it verbally in that over the cup of tea, but you also over an email. And I don't mean exhaust a social worker with emails, but I mean just putting an email together saying, I've read it, and here below is the things that I'm just questioning.
Perfect. And again, it's that regulation within yourself that's going to be able to get you through this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you need any help with any of this, just give us a shout. Okay, so I've got a few more questions that have come in since we've been live. Even with a diagnosis, FII can be raised as an issue, and we know this because autism, they seem to just ignore the diagnosis a lot of the time. Is this factual, do you think, or is it because they don't understand the diagnosis?
I think there's many different reasons. I think it is that it's 1960s, 1970s autism lens, understanding what autism is or isn't. I think it's lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that training tends to be quite basic. Would you agree, Mary? Within local authorities, is very different to the training that Mary and I get to access. So that can be an issue as well.
And and the thing is, it's on a case-by-case basis. There may be genuine, behaviours being displayed with nothing behind the scenes, and in which case we do need to investigate it. But a diagnosis doesn't prevent an FII allegation, does it?
No, not at all.
Can claiming PIP or DLA also be used against parents in FII allegations, i.e. making it up for financial gain?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that if a child was getting DLA or, a young person was getting PIP, that actually adds evidence that the child has, because again, you don't need a diagnosis for DLA. But I suppose what these questions are sort of looking at is, what are the negative implications if you get DLA, if you get PIP, if you've got a diagnosis? And they're drawing on all information, and that's what social work for the assessment has to do. It has to balance it. So you get DLA for your 8-year-old boy, but that DLA money goes on drum lessons and going to the trampoline and climbing activities, because they're all OT sensory linked. So, and it's you feeling confident, well, we do get DLA, we get this amount a month, and this is what I pay for Tommy to do. and that is fictitious name, during the week to help him regulate. So keep backing, I don't mean justify, but this is why I do this, and this is why I do this, because these things help.
Yeah, and I think if you've got, and we always say, in fact, we're about to produce a webinar on sort of being a send parent and the admin that's involved, because it's so admin heavy.
A lot, yeah.
Boxes of paperwork. But essentially, I think if you've got, and we always say, buy yourself a cheap diary, and you've got your diary there, but then also have like a file that sits with the diary, or, with most of us is 10, 15 files. But you've got the evidence there, maybe you've got your DLA file that says, there's my claim, there was all my evidence, I went to tribunal and there was the evidence. And, I think professionals need to understand as well, it's not easy to get DLA. It's not easy to get PIP. It's really difficult. I know so many people who've had their PIP and DLA stripped from them, and they desperately need it. These are children with very, very high care needs. They cannot sleep through the night because of whatever difficulties they're having, and they're being stripped of this financial help. So I think, evidence things as much as possible. You don't have to keep receipts and things, but if you do, I mean, that in itself is fantastic if you've got that level of record keeping. So I think the better you can be with record keeping and documenting what's going on, the more help you're going to get, actually, because essentially when it comes down to even diagnostics, if you've got a file full of anecdotal evidence of stuff and dates and who you've told and what's happened, things can move along a lot quicker. So
yeah, the other thing is, I don't know if it's nationwide, but there are quite a few organisations. It's called Carers Resources, and it's voluntary. They get paid, but they can help with DLA forms, and really helpful in that terms of just taking. I think we, as parents, it's that living and breathing, and that we're totally absorbed and engrossed in it. Absolutely. And from my experience, I had to go, just stop. For me, for my mental health, for me to be able to continue to do, the work that needed to be done in our family, but also for my own mental health, because I could feel that I just can't continue living like this. It's so absorbing. And I think those emotional cups of tea, having people around you that not necessarily are going through the same thing, but similar, that identification, but also what's good for you to do. I've done a HIT class this morning because it's good for me. Whatever is good for you, just to breathe. Just to breathe.
Absolutely. And I was mentioning before we came live that we've actually started to produce behind the scenes. We've produced very gentle exercise videos that are going to be going on our Sunshine Academy, which we're really excited about. And they're going to be stress busters, and they're going to be, how to improve your mobility and how to stay moving, so that, because the movement actually helps with trauma. Trust me, there's science in it, the movement helps with trauma. It helps with, and the sooner you can do that movement and channel that trauma through the movement, the less effect it has on your body, as in bad effect. So we know that this level of trauma that families go through when they're going through FII allegations is so significant. And, being a send parent is stressful anyway, not necessarily because of the child, although sometimes it can be, but more because of the system. So you've got these layers of trauma and stress and anxiety, and we don't get rid of them quickly enough, which means nearly always we get so many parents come back to us saying, a year after the tribunal happened, I had a stroke, and I'm fit as a fiddle. But no, you're not, though, because the trauma is being stored in your body. Or they've got Crohn's disease. I mean, I've got Crohn's disease. That I meet so many families where the parents are plagued with, autoimmune conditions like Crohn's disease.
Going on to, if the people are watching today, if parents are watching today, and there's even a rumbling of FII, it can be really, really not as obvious. I read an assessment the other day, and it said, the guidance and under guidance and boundaries, it was really like other professionals have encouraged parents to change their guidance and boundaries. It was really done really under the radar, but I felt it was for me.
You see it termed differently. I can see emotional abuse.
So if you feel there are rumblings, one of the biggest advice would be, Rachel's touched on it, get an advocate.
Straight away.
And, I'm all for getting people to attend meetings with parents, not to take over, but so you feel supported in what you're saying. And if you have a diagnosis yourself, you can ask for reasonable adjustments. ADHD or autism, ask for the adjustments. Say, these are my diagnoses. I need time to process what is being said. And for any meeting, if any reports are being done for child protection, there will be reports. They should be coming to you. And sometimes local authorities say we'll do it 3 days before the meeting. Ask for it for a week before. You have a need, and I think it's that. Feel confident. You're not being up. It's reasonable adjustments. The social workers, it's that.
Take your time.
Rachel?
And take the time to go through the report before the meeting with the advocate. Be clear. You will instantly feel more confident going into the meeting when you've done that then beforehand with the advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant advice. So another question that's come in whilst we've been online this morning is, what is the reasoning when accusing parents that their children are at risk of future harm, even when there are no findings of harm currently?
Okay, so I wonder if that's more like as they're getting older. So, a 4-year-old's risk and a 10-year-old's risk, and then a teenager's risk, and that can be under the contextual safeguarding, that could be under criminal exploitation, county lines, which is a lot of work that I used to do. Children with SEN needs are more vulnerable. We know this. We know the evidence out there. So it's not at the moment is 11, so we're not too worried.
Yes.
But that 13, that 14, that 15, when they're the push-pull factors, we talk about push-pull factors with teenagers. So the push is they're being pushed into something because of their vulnerabilities, and they're pulled because they're drawn to it. And there's a really good website, I can't think of the name now, that does a lot of work around grooming, exploitation.
We work with one called the NWG network. That's a really good one. And Kevin Murphy, who works for them, he used to be a SEND advocate, so he's got a real fabulous sort of view of both, and they're doing some tremendous work. So do Google them. But if there's any others that anybody wants to share, do let us know. And I suppose
what we're saying right now, there isn't the risk because of their age and because of there's many factors why a child will be safe today. But what we look at is that research, that what happens moving forward, and how then can we try and protect them and keep them. It's not that they're from harm in the home or the family, it's out there, and the risks are very real out there today. They're really
absolutely
difficult.
So they're not necessarily saying then that the children, so I don't know whether this question is saying that the children are at risk of the parents in the future. So would that be the similar sort of thing then, Mary? Would that?
Well, I mean, if you're saying parents are a risk in the future, then my question would be, well, why are they a risk now? And is it one parent that's a risk, or is it both parents that are a risk? And it probably needs, it's difficult to answer sometimes some of the questions. It requires, so I'm thinking maybe because the child, and it's about parents. We talk about parental capacity, and I don't mean mental capacity, it's capacity to know that when your child is 4, you're going to be doing more physical stuff with the child, to when they are 14, you might not be doing as many physical tasks, you're more emotionally there. So it could be along those lines.
I suppose as well, because we don't know the context of the question, it could be that the parent has some sort of degenerative illness. So in which case, the family are all at risk in future if you've got a very aggressive, violent child.
But it's not risk in terms of, as I understand, risk of significant harm. It's not an intentional, that is a life-changing, it could be a parent's poorly, and there could be so many different factors, and it's having a proportionate response to that risk.
Yes.
The risk goes up and down and it fluctuates. And sometimes it's really high risk. And I used to do a lot of high risk work. And your aim is to make that situation as safe as possible, even at high risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think as well, you know, if this particular parent wants to get in touch and have a chat
Yes.
with everybody, we can absolutely have a direct
Yeah,
chat.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So this question is from David Crisp. Now, David has produced some content that we're going to be sharing later today. So he's got a great knowledge of this field. And it all stems from his personal experience. So David says, in many cases, FII occurs just for a parent asking for help. Why would an actual abuser push for social care help? You know, yeah, absolutely. If they're actually hurting their child, he said it's like a criminal going out of their way to see the police.
Yeah,
Right.
totally get that.
And I think, you know, I work really closely with a colleague, and we talk about when parents want social care to help, and what I think there needs to probably be some webinars on what that could look like, and what, you know, if a parent says to me, I'd love some help, and I go, we pull that right back and go, right, what do you need help with? What specifically, really narrowing it and drawing it down. And it can be as simple as, I can't get him to clean his teeth. I mean, I'm not talking about PDA here. Or I can't get him to sleep, or God, getting to school is just a nightmare. And then once we start drawing it down and getting really the fine details, then it's unpicking how then what are the solutions for that? What approaches can be used? Because we know the traditional approaches are not going to work, as you know, learned myself.
Yeah.
We learn, don't we? So yeah, I don't know. I never in my years as a local authority social worker did I have a case where they were open because they weren't in school, or for any of the reasons that I speak with parents today. Never. I never had those cases. It just wasn't. So I don't know what's going on for local authorities. I do know that recently there was a case where the parents it was FII, the parents were absolutely, it was very clear in all the paperwork, and we complained with an advocate, myself and the parent, and it was stepped down.
Wow.
Because a manager from another team dealt with the complaint and could see what we were saying. So it's trying to look at the best way to deal with the situation you're in. And
it's all about language. You know, when you're approaching these people, and again, I loved your idea, by the way, of how to ask for help, because I think we can definitely do a webinar on that. But it's the language, like I said, you know, that sandwich that we were talking about, but making sure that the language is correct and that we don't go in aggressive. You know, we've had to coach so many parents because they're so cross, and they're rightfully angry and cross, and they've got every right to feel like that. But we've had to say, just breathe a minute, because you're absolutely relentlessly attacking these professionals. And yeah, you are right in thinking that they deserve it, but you're not going to get the best for your child. So right now, let's just focus on what we need to achieve. Like you said, what help do you actually need? And then going from there.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, I'm cautious when I go and assess a child, because I'm going into their safe space. Yeah. They have needs that I may not be fully aware of, and I try and get as much information before I go. I try and find out key information from the parents, but I'm going into that child's safe space. Yes. So if I'm doing it as an independent social worker, and you are really aware that actually professionals coming into the home really distresses your child, then why would you want a social worker in your home? So it's really balancing, actually, if I'm asking for help from these people, what does that look like? Yes, absolutely. And, you know, sometimes parents aren't asking for social work help, and they just get landed with social care. Yes. And we had a case recently where a little girl who isn't autistic, but does have sensory processing difficulties and other difficulties, she was desperate in lockdown to see people. She just wanted to see people. She was really missing how much connection she had with the world. And so she would sort of hear people at the back of her house over the field, and she'd think, oh, I'll just go and see who it is. So she's only little, she's only 6, and she'd do a little runner to go and see the people. And her parents would go, oh my God, she's gone. And most of the time they would catch her as she was going,
And she wasn't in a state of distress. She was being curious, actually, and desperately wanted to connect again. And she did it a number of times, and they caught her, and they found her on the drive or whatever. But then it came to the point where she did it whilst they didn't see. And she'd just been playing in the garden. She actually scaled a wall, 6-foot wall, and got out and went. And she was barefoot, and she ran and ran and ran until she found people. So she was down at the local shops. And of course, she was picked up. There was already the police out there looking for her. And this happened once. Social care got in touch with the family. The family were nervous because they'd had previous experiences with social care. And social care said, no, it sounds like you've got everything covered. We just wanted to make sure we were checking in. That's fine. A few weeks later, the little girl did it again and went for another run. And she was really pleased with herself because this time she put her shoes on. So she thought that was the problem, you know. And social care got in touch and they said, no, we know you know what you're doing. We're going to leave it there. School is aware. Fantastic. Closed the case down. 2 weeks later, child didn't go missing again. But another social worker rang up and said, I've reviewed your file and I'm not happy that it's been closed down. I'm coming out to see you. So the parents were like, and we were coaching them through it and saying, okay, just breathe. Okay, this is going to be okay. We know you're safe. We would have raised a safeguarding concern ourselves. You're working with lots of people for another child of yours. Nobody has highlighted that there are any problems. Now, we coached this parent through and she said to the social worker, I'm more than happy to have you in my home and I'm glad you're trying to keep my child safe. However, I need you to know we've had previous experience with social care and it didn't go so well, but we won in the end. We had to go quite far, but we won in the end and it's left us feeling quite traumatized. So please, can you be gentle with us? And by that, we mean, if you say you're going to turn up at 4 o'clock, please, can you turn up at 4 o'clock? The social worker said, well, I need to come into your house. And the parent, we were with the parent at the time whilst they were on the phone. The parent said, I agree you're coming into my house, but I just need you to turn up on time. And she said, well, you cannot deny me access to the house. And I thought, actually, right now, this is voluntary. So they could actually deny you access to the house, but let's not be inflammatory. Let's go with it. So we said, I'm not denying you access to my house. I'm asking that you turn up on time. And the social worker was quite abrupt and hung up pretty much. What happened? The social worker didn't turn up at all. And the family got a call 1 hour after she should have been there to say that she wasn't turning up. So again, they were, whoa, you know. So the following time, they said, look, last time I appreciate you had a safeguarding thing going on. And they were the parents were meeting this social worker way more than halfway. The social worker was late by half an hour on the second appointment. The parents were stressed out. The kids, therefore, were stressed out because the parents are therefore stressed out. So the minute the parent walks in, the social worker walks in, the kids went through everything that was bad in their lives. 3 years ago, we were on holidays and that one jumped in the pool without a life jacket on. And they went through everything. Last summer, that one kicked a ball in my face. And you could see that there was tension in the home. And I just want social workers to understand that if they'd met that parent where they were, which actually was in a really regulated state, and they said, absolutely, you've got my word. I will try my best to be on time. However, I am a social worker, which means I work in the field of safeguarding. If there's an emergency, I will let you know. But they have an agreement. It's that contracting that Kathy talks about, isn't it? Creating the contract and the agreement and the expectations at which you're both going to work. And I think this is really important. And I don't think parents would be attacked for saying, can we agree a way of working?
Absolutely.
No, I'd appreciate that.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And if, mum and dads are working, so you do a visit, and as a local authority social worker, I do the visit when they got home from work, when the children were home from school, it's that contract, but it's also just that relationship building. And, it's interesting, isn't it? They close a case and then open it again. Well, hold on a minute. Your colleague said it was, I was going up a little bit then when you were talking. I was like, well, why were they doing that when they did that? And it's really for parents just to stay as calm as you can.
And it's hard.
Really hard.
We always say that, lots of parents come to us and they say, oh, I managed to get tablets for when I'm feeling stressed out. The best thing for stress is oxygen. The best thing to calm down the part of your brain that flares up when you're in stress is oxygen. It's the only thing that will calm it down. So it sounds ridiculous, and for years I kept saying, I'm not a hippie, I'm not going to start hugging trees. It's all about breathing. It really is, but getting that deep belly breathe every time. And if anybody wants any more tips on breathing and how to exercise your vagus nerve, let me know, because I'm all over it. Just send us a message. Right, I'm going to go on to the next question. We've only got a couple more, and then we're going to probably log off about 22, if that's all right with everybody.
Okay.
How would they deal with a child with selective mutism that occurs when is stressed and meeting new people?
I mean, that's very similar to what we were just talking about in terms of the approach, isn't it, from the social worker as well, and the understanding and getting that advice from the parent, who's, you know, will be an expert in the child's needs. So it's about not so much a contract like we were just talking about, but just having that understanding, isn't it, about what works. So I think Mary spoke about earlier, we tend to do visits differently if a child doesn't manage a professional coming to the house. And me and Mary spend a lot of time making videos and singing and all sorts of things.
Getting creative now, getting really creative. It's not a skill set.
Yeah.
Do a video. Say to the social worker, could you do a WhatsApp voice note? Could you do a WhatsApp video and record it and just go, my name is Mary, I'm going to be coming to see you on this day. I think, you know, your mum told me you really like whatever it is that they're absolutely into. Usually something to do with computers that I have absolutely no idea about. And your special interest. Whoever is coming into your home, the biggest advice I would give is tell them your child's special interests.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. It's the first thing I'm like, tell me what they like.
And then I have to learn them, don't we? We have to learn whatever that is, we've got to learn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I usually say I know nothing about it. So I was on an assessment the other month and it was absolutely, I had no idea. And I went in and I said, I've looked, I've researched, but could you just tell me a bit more about it? I mean, that's not for, so using different approaches.
Yes.
Text, you know, it's wonderful videos. Yeah.
And I think with selective mutism as well, I've actually got selective mutism, which you wouldn't probably think because I'm here on camera in my safe space and I'm absolutely fine. But with selective mutism, it's about understanding what created the selective mutism. Was it something that's, it's always anxiety driven, it's an anxiety disorder, actually. But sometimes a trauma, a single trauma can affect it, or a series of traumas, or something else. There's lots of ways and reasons behind it, but it's really important that the professional understands why, in order to understand how they can come underneath that. And don't, you know, for the professionals watching today, don't underestimate the power of the parent, because the parent is your key to the child. If you want to get through the door to a child, ask the parent. But quite often, I mean, one of my daughters always used to say to me, have you met that one yet? And I'd say, yes. Good or bad? You know, she would go to me for authorization. And the minute I said, actually, I think this one has your best interest at heart, but be cautious, she would play it literally as I said it. But if I felt that they were attacking us, I'd say, well, personally, this is how I'm being made to feel. So then my daughter would go, nope, not talking. So, you know, the key
absolutely, you know, build a relationship up. I do that even on my independent assessments, any assessment, I build a relationship up with the parent, because if the child can see that there's trust and there's something being built up, then mum's all right, dad's all right, grandma's all right, Auntie Bethel's all right, you know, they're all right. And then they can start to, you know, it's that trust.
Exactly. And I think, you know, parents do say to the social workers, can we come up with a plan first to develop our relationship before? And I appreciate that, you know, go in with I appreciate you're under the cosh here with all the targets and deadlines that you've got, but I really would value, I think you're going to get more out of my child if we can get to know each other first, and then I can introduce you slowly to my child. So
yeah, and you know, assessment that way.
I don't know a local authority social, well, I probably don't know a local authority, you know, I would be local authority social workers and social workers in children's lives research has shown us it's not a positive long term.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work should be able to go in, build that relationship up, look to see what's needed, put in place what's needed, and then withdraw. Because actually we know children who have long-term social work involvement, the outcomes are very poor.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, a valid point has been raised. Why should parents need coaching to speak to social workers? At the end of the day, social workers are supposed to be trained to see through the language that we use. Absolutely. However, that just doesn't seem to be happening. And I think that us being coached as parents is a firefighting technique. This is not what we're campaigning for long term. We're campaigning for better education for social workers, more access to training, less judgment, more curiosity. And we are not saying, you know, to sort of coach a parent or to coach a victim is very much a victim blaming thing. And I appreciate that. But at the same time, with the families that are coming to us now who are in the middle of it, we need to help them get out of it, particularly, you know, if they are innocent, which we've not found a guilty one yet. So everybody's innocent that we've dealt with. I think it's really important because nobody wants to stay in that conflict. So I just want to clear the air there and just say, you know, set the record straight, because that's not.
And I think,
for the parents,
you know, I've worked a lot with, you know, I've worked over the years with some absolutely amazing social workers, and you know, I can't sit here and criticize. You know, I've got to have a balance. Yeah. I say to a lot of my parents, I don't know everything. When we do the training, and I'm sure Rachel and Kathy and many social workers would agree, we do training in adults and children. Yeah. And predominantly social working with children is safeguarding. You know, proportionately, there are more children who are being, you know, it's about protecting them, keeping them safe. So it's not about them and us. Yeah. It's about a working together partnership. So if a social worker has been assigned to a family, my bigger, you know, that it's that advice we've talked about all morning, that advocacy, that talking to people who can support you emotionally, and actually educating. The families that I've assessed independently have educated me. They've further deepened my knowledge. Would you agree, Rachel?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Because I don't know everything, and you know,
you know what? Just as a professional, just say, because we don't know everything and the ins and outs of everything. Just ask.
And what did David Mitchell say in he forwarded on a book on autism, and he said, if you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child. So you could I could put 20 children that I've assessed and go, well, I had to use that strategy and that strategy and that strategy. And you know, I'm not a local authority social worker. You know, they have high caseloads. It is unbelievably difficult to manage, you know, their difficulties. So I'm trying to be pragmatic with it. I'm not all, you know, I'm not.
That is an issue. That is an issue, especially with a child, and there's perhaps been some FII concerns then, and you've got the 45-day.
Yeah.
You know, and you need. If we're doing an assessment, want to find out more information and to support, then you know we might need a sensory integration trained OT to do that assessment. To you know, lots of different factors, and it's that 45-day that bothers me a little bit. I think, well, how would you bring all that into such a short period of time?
Yeah, you can't, and you know, it's
which would mean you need to be quite experienced.
Yeah,
to be able to manage.
Definitely, without a doubt.
Now, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in here. Now, I'm running over by a minute, which I know that we're okay with at the moment, but I'm going to ask a really massive question as the final question. It might be massive, or you might just go nothing, actually. But what if you get a good social worker who understands your child's profile and everything's going swimmingly well, right? It never happens. But let's just pretend we're in that zone. This is happening. What can social care actually do to help a family?
I mean, there's lots of things really in terms of social care support.
Well, anything. If a family was to go to social care and expect some good help, what would that look like?
Big question, Chrissa. Okay. Well,
So
Okay.
first of all, we'd look at community activities. So is that what, and it's that, isn't it? What, like you just said, you know, what can social care do? There
For
could
us,
be, so
it's
there's
very
things like, yeah,
bad, isn't it? It's not. In our assessments, we talk about a range of things. So we're looking at social care, education, and health, and we bring that all together in our assessments. And we need to work around that. So we just don't want to look at. Not just don't want to look at social care and what that provides, but how we go into it's a bit of a coordination role, I find, as the social work coordinator of, you know, that's how I see it, because I need to look at education, social care factors, that the health, that the needs of the family, and that needs to come into the assessment. So then we need to, you know, at the end of that, then we need, of course, we will make recommendations of what that will look like with the family, but we need to consider all those. So for me, it's a little bit more than just saying we're going to give you 25 hours a week direct payment. You know, it's got to be informed.
Yeah.
What the care and support package or whatever it is got to be informed, and if that needs to
Yeah.
bring in education and schooling, all these, whether we call them systems, but all these things work together for the benefit of the child. So does that make sense?
So I've just recommended climbing for one assessment. You know, it's in the assessment because this boy's got significant sensory needs. So I've said, you know what, there's a climbing wall down the road. Mum found it. It's 1 hour on a Sunday for this boy. So I've put that's a social care provision because it's a community activity. It's mixing. It's, you know, it's a really good activity as climbing. I can't praise it enough. So I've put that in an assessment. You know, there are lots of, and actually, we're not really that limited. You know, I think one solicitor's asked me to try and get dolphins swimming in one of my assessments to see if I can get that approved. I've got horse riding because we know horse riding, equine therapy is really good. We know if it's an Ehcp, you've got prep for adulthood.
Yeah.
There's loads in there for social care. So, but like Rachel said, it's not just a social care assessment. I use the assessment framework because it's just a good guide.
For
So,
Mary
you know,
and I, it's a difficult question to answer, isn't it? Because it's
everything and anything.
You know, like the way we do EOTAS packages and
Yeah.
things with the social care and the education, and we're looking at therapeutic and within that as well.
So
and
I recommended parents doing like therapeutic parenting course or going to do an autism course, not the level 2 standard ones, a proper thorough course. Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's got to be needs led and not resources led. So you've got to take out what resources as a local authority social worker I have, and look at what that child actually needs. And if it's not available in the local authority, you still need to advise that. And what I will say is that as social workers, regardless, of course, you know, it's important who you work for, I guess, but you've got to be accountable in your own right as a social worker, and you have to identify needs. You can't fit a child, a young person, or a family into whatever resource that is. It is what it is, and if you know it might not be available, that you need to work to your best ability.
Dolphin swimming.
And
Wow,
this is it.
Personal budgets. Be creative with them.
Yeah, be creative.
Personal budgets. Be creative.
And I think, you know, along with like the EHCPs and the statements or IDPs in Wales, it's personalized to the child, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you said, I love that. I've written it down. It needs to be needs led, not resource led. And I think this is exactly what we say to parents in the EHCPs and the statements that we do. You know, it's not about what the school can offer. It's not about what the local authority can offer. It's about what your child needs. And I think actually that's a very nice way to end this Facebook Live, because this is essentially what everything is about. It's about needs. Your DLA is based on needs. Your PIP as an adult is based on needs. EHCP, social care assessments, you know, your access to work, all of it is based on need, not diagnosis, not resources. Well, ladies, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you today. And I think whilst we've not made light of a very serious topic, I think we've made it very accessible and very informal, which is very much what needs to happen in order for people to understand what's going on. But I do urge anybody who's watching, or anybody who's watching the playback, anybody that you think that needs any help, get in touch. Don't suffer on your own. Maybe you just need to come to a cuppa and chat. Maybe you just need a call. We offer free advice calls. You know, maybe that's all you need. Or maybe you do need an independent social work assessment, or you might need an advocate. Whatever you need, just let us know and we will do our best to help you. Sunshine was set up from going through this very experience for me and my family, and to be able to create this wonderful community now where we can all help each other and validate each other. Honestly, it chokes me up. I just can't. This is like
It's been an emotional week for you know, personally I found it very emotional this week, and not because I've personally been through it, but I think this secondary trauma there sometimes, Chrissa, when I'm working so much on with families around FII, and I've been a little bit emotional this week about it all, but absolutely brilliant to Sunshine Support for what you've done this week. To George, was absolutely amazing. And the guidance which I have read yesterday and today about 4 or 5 times that Kathy and Fiona, and Judy and Andy have all had a part in was absolutely amazing. And take that document with you if you need to.
Yes,
is what I'd say to
Yes.
parents. Okay, inform.
And George has just messaged me to say we've had a message come in saying, please, can this be shared with every social worker? Now, we could give it a go. I'm not sure that we could do that. By all means, share it with your social workers. But I must say that any social worker who is subscribed to the Professional Social Worker Art magazine that comes out, is it quarterly?
Yeah.
That will have dropped on their doormats yesterday, and it has a 3-page spread on FII week, and my story is published in there as well. Something I don't do publicly anymore, but this is specifically for social workers to improve their practice. And so I was happy to share it. And I think that whilst this video will not be possible to be shared with every social worker, FII Awareness Week is. And so if they look at the hashtags, they're seeing this content, and hopefully change will happen, along with the wonderful practice guidance that's been put together. You know, these are significant changes in the landscape here. So
I mean, this has been, you know, in an ideal world would have been something we had years ago, because it's very outdated. The medical, I won't go into that, but the medical model, it's very outdated, isn't it? And yeah, it's like music to my ears, this new guidance. So I'll be taking it everywhere, every local authority I will be sharing it with.
Yay! And that's all we can do as a community now, guys. Just share and engage. And the more engagement we have, and the more sharing, the more knowledge that we're going to be able to put out there. So it's a team effort. And, you know, FII Awareness Week doesn't belong to us. We instigated it, but it all belongs to you. So use it. Don't abuse it. No, we're all traumatized. Don't abuse it. Just use it. But thank you both so much. I can't wait to have the webinar with you. It's going to be great. But have a lovely weekend, and I'll catch up with you both soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.